So the topic we will be discussing today is Meleches Kotv. And since we started Shabbos, we have covered various different Melechos. I gave a few shurim on the fundamental ideas that are uniform by all the Lametes Melechos. We spoke about Meleches Mosheves and Psik Reisha, and then we're dealing with individual, specific Melechos. So Meleches Kotv is fascinating. And the fundamental question we ask, HaKotv shtei oisiyos. Meleches Kotv refers to oisiyos or to words. It is about words or letters. Shtei oisiyos is because to write a word, the minimum you need is shtei oisiyos. I'm not a linguist, I'm not a mumche, I'm not a professor, but I think this is unique to Lashon HaKodesh. We have many words that are two letters. I'm not aware that in English we have two-letter words. Maybe we do, but not many. So Kotv shtei oisiyos, is that because Meleches Kotv refers to words, or does it refer to letters? And shtei oisiyos is just a shiur, like Oichel ki groi geres, like all the other shiurim of Meleches Shabbos. Chazal analyzed uberuach kodsham, with their profound wisdom and divine inspiration. Ba'omek binosam uberuach kodsham, they defined what is the minimum shiur to give importance, to give significance to a malacha. And they said shtei oisiyos. So does Meleches Kotv deal with letters or with words? In the Mishnah, the fundamental Mishnah, Oves Maloches Arboim Chosar Achas. Ein Gimel Amud Aleph. There are only a very few malachos in which Chazal specify in the Mishnah. What is the shiur? Oirik Shnei Chutim, Toife Shtei Tfiros, Kotv Shtei Oisiyos, Oise Shnei Botei Nirin. And Tosfos asks the question, why is it only by these malachos that Chazal specify the shiur and not by all the others? More than 30 malachos, 35 Chazal don't say the shiur, and I think it's only 4 or 5 that they do. Magen Avos, fascinating sefer, one of the most fundamental sporim on Meleches Shabbos, Magen Avos from Rav Mordechai Bennett. I happen to see it be an article of Rav Mordechai Bennett. Rav Mordechai Bennett was one of the giants. The Sam Sofer had tremendous derech and admiration of Rav Mordechai Bennett. And he wrote a few svarim. One of his choshev svarim is Magen Avos, a very small sefer on Lametes Melechos. And he makes a very fundamental argument, a fundamental yesod, and he says, those very few malachos in which Chazal in the Mishnah specify a shiur, that is because it's not the classical sense of a shiur, but rather the essence of the malacha. So Rav Mordechai Bennett explains, why does the Mishnah say shtei oisiyos? Shtei oisiyos is not a shiur. It is the essence of the malacha. L'chayra, what Rav Mordechai Bennett is saying is that shtei oisiyos is a word, and Kotv refers to words and not to letters. But I'm an einikel of Rav Mordechai Bennett, and therefore I need to make an effort to justify what he says. And I think it is quite clear that Meleches Kotv refers to letters and not to words. But let me further clarify the fundamental chakira. So the Meiri, in the beginning of the Masechta, Daf Beis, the Meiri makes a fundamental distinction between Chotzi Shia and Chotzi Malacha. The basic assumption is, according to the Yochanan, Chotzi Shia Osam and Torah, Lo kedivrei hachacham tzvi. Chacham tzvi Siman Pei Vav argues, we don't find Chotzi Shia Osam and Torah only by Yisuri Achila, because Yoma Ayin Gimel, that is the source of Machloikes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Halachic Rabbi Yochanan Chotzi Shia Osam and Torah. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have a machlokes regarding ma'acholos asuros. Chacham Tzvi Siman Pei Vav maintains it is only by ma'acholos asuros that we find Choshos in Torah. Pele, the Chacham Tzvi wasn't aware, at least momentarily. Rashi Lahed Yeshabbos Ayin Gimel Choshos in Torah refers to Malachas Shabbos as well, and it is also in Agos Oshli, and also in the Meiri, the beginning of the Masechta. However, the Meiri explains regarding Meleches Haitzah, ha'oikar ve'einoi maniach. Beferish Gemur, it's only in Esterabonon. Why isn't there a Chotzi Shir? So the Meiri draws a distinction between Chotzi and Malacha. Akira and Hanacha are not a Shir. It is the very essence of Meleches Haitzah. You need to remove an object from one rishus and place it in another rishus, either from rishus yochid to rishus rabim or the other way around, from rishus rabim to rishus yochid. So you need to pick up the object, and that is tchilas hamalacha, that's akira, put it down in another rishus, and that is hanacha. So akira and hanacha have nothing to do with shiurim. It is the essence, mahus. And that is a chotzi malacha. Chotzi malacha is only osem the rabbanon, chotzi shir osem atayim. And the Meiri gives an example. When would we say chotzi shir osem atayim? HaKosev ois achas. So the Meiri clearly says, shtei oisios is a shir. L'cha'oira, according to the Mordechai Bennett, if we would assume that shtei oisios is the essence of the malacha, because malachas kosev refers to words and not to letters, then osachas would be like oikar velo heniach. It would be defined as a chotzi malacha. And the Meiri clearly says it is a chotzi shir. Maybe we will dedicate another shir to the question of chotzi shir b'malachas Shabbos. Fascinating sugya, and have big chedushim in this sugya. Not for today. Today we deal with Kaisev. Chuvas HaRamosim and Kuf Yutes. B'toich HaDvorim, the Ramos says, we don't learn from the Mishkan the Shir of Shtei Oisios, because we don't learn Shiurim from the Mishkan. From the Mishkan we only learn Malachis, not Shiurim. And that is why the Ramo maintains Shtei Oisios we don't learn from the Mishkan. It is Chazal, Baruch Kodsham, Ba'omek Binasam, that defined the reasonable shir for Kosev would be Shtei Oisios. Rashi, Ayin Hayom Weiss, clearly says, how do we know Shtei Oisios? From the Mishkan. Because where was Kosev in the Mishkan? They wrote a letter on this Keresh and on the other Keresh, and that is how they knew which two crossing fit together. So essentially, Kosev in the Mishkan was two letters, one in this Keresh and one in the other one. The Yordeya Lezavgan, to put them together. So Rashi does say, we'll learn Shtei Oisios from the Mishkan. Would I argue that according to the Rashi, it is the essence, and according to the Ramah, it's a shir? No. Maybe Rashi disagrees with the Ramah. The Rashi says we could learn shiurim from the Mishkan. So once again, Shtei Oisios, is it because Malachas Kosev refers to words, and we need a minimum of 2 letters to write a word? Or would Shtei Oisios be a shir, like Shir Kegeres Boichlin and any other shir? Just occurred to me, I said before, I'm not sure that in English we have words of 2 letters. We have words of 1 letter, like a man, a woman, a cat, a dog. So a is a word, and it only has 1 letter. Interesting. But no nafka min al halacha. I'm just retracting a comment that I made before, just kivederech agav. So let's come back to the fundamental question. Is Shtei Oisios a shir, or do we need words? We definitely don't need words, at least according to the majority of Rishonim. Kosev Shtei Oisios. Kosef Shtei Osiyos we find twice in the Mishnah. Ein Gimel Omid Aleph, and that is when the Mishnah counts, enumerates all the Lamatas Malachas. Ovas Malachas Aboam Chosachas. We once again find Shtei Osiyos in the Mishnah dealing specifically with Melechas Kosef, Shabbos Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. HaKosef Shtei Osiyos Chayev. Bein Mishem Echad, bein Mishnei Shemois. Rashi writes Mishem Echad, Shnei Alefin. Aleph Aleph, Chayev. Aleph Aleph is not a word. So obviously this is a machlokes between Rambam and Rashi. Because the Rambam, Perek Yud Aleph in Hilchos Shabbos, Halacha Tes, the Rambam writes, Shia Kosef Shtei Osiyos. And then the Rambam writes in Halacha Yud, HaKosef Shtei Osiyos, two different letters, like Aleph Beis, Aleph Daled, Shtei Osiyos Chayev. But if he writes the same letter twice, Einoi Chayev, Ela, if it's a word, like Sheish, two shins, Aleph Tov, Ace, no, that's not the same letter, Teis. Two examples that Rambam gives is Sheish, Teis, Rar, but Aleph Aleph, according to Rambam, would not be Chayev. Rashi clearly says, Kuv Gimel Omed Aleph, that he is Chayev. So, both according to Rashi and according to the Rambam, it is clear that two Osiyos is a chiyuv, even though it's not a word. According to Rashi, even if he writes the same letter twice. Definitely, if he writes two different letters. The Rambam argues, same letter, only if it's a word. Different letters, even if it's not a word. So both Rashi and Rambam clearly say, HaKosef Shtei Osiyos Chayev, even though they don't fit together. It's not a word. In the Mishkan, it wasn't a word. It was Aleph Aleph, or similar, two Keroshim. One letter in this Keresh, same letter in the other Keresh, to put them together. How do we know? Maybe it wasn't the same letter. Maybe it was Aleph Beis, Gimel Daled, Hey Vav. We don't know exactly. All we know is they wrote letters, and that is how they knew which Keresh belongs where. So both the Rambam and Rashi agree. If it's two different letters, it does not have to be a word. And that proves Kosef Shtei Osiyos is not about writing words, it is about letters. But I still would argue, coming back to the Mordechai Bennett, Shtei Osiyos is the essence of Ksiva. Because the Chashivas of Shtei Osiyos is not just like all the other Shiurim. Too small is insignificant, too little is insignificant, and the Shir is just a question of quantity. Like Kezayis, Revius, Groigeres, Koiseves, all the classical Shirim, it's just a question of how much. Shtei Osiyos is not about quantity. It is because the minimum amount of letters you need to write a word is Shtei Osiyos. You don't necessarily need to write a word. What I'm trying to explain is a nuance. And Kol HaTorah Kula is full of nuances, of dakus as-savara. And the most important part in savara is to be sensitive and understand and define dakuyot, nuances. So what I mean to say is this. I agree with Reb Mordechai Bennett. Shtei Osiyos is mahus. It is the essence of a malacha and not only a shir, because it's not a question of quantity. How many? Could be 2, could be 3, could be 4, could be 5. All the classical shiurim that we find in the Breiset 3 times in Shas. Shivas Aminim Shenishtabchu B'Meretz Yisrael. Kezayis, Koiseves B'Yom HaKippurim. Groigeres B'Malach Shabbos B'Oichlen. In all the classical shiurim, it's a question of quantity. How much? Arboam So B'Mikveh. How much? Shtei oisius is not just a question of quantity, it is the essence, because the chashivas of ksiva is words. Maleches ksiva is letters. Maleches kosev is writing letters. But the chashivas of letters is because we use letters to write words, and we use words to convey ideas, to convey halachas. And that is the shir of Shtei Oisius. So Shtei Oisius is mahus. It is the essence of Kosev. Not because we need to write words. Meleches Kosev refers to letters. But letters have no chashivas, only because they compose words. Words convey ideas. Words convey knowledge. So Reb Mordechai Bennett doesn't mean to say that Meleches Kosev is writing words. That goes against Rashi, goes against the Rambam. I think it goes against the Sugya Meforeshes. HaKosev os achas ve'shlimo leSefer Chayiv. So if you have a Sefer Torah or a Chumash, it's missing one letter. Your Chayiv al Ksivas os achas. And why is that? Chashivus. Sometimes one letter is as important as two letters. It is only Chazal that could define and decide when, and Chazal say, if you're a Mashlim an entire Sefer with one letter, then that one letter has Chashivas. I didn't write a word. And it's not because I finished a word. No, finishing a word with one letter, you're not Chayiv. It's only Mashlim Sefer Sholem, an entire Sefer. But what does this prove? That Shtei Oisius is about Chashivus. And that is why, Kosev os achas ve'ishlim Sefer Chayiv. So my opinion is very clear. Meleches Kosev refers to letters. And that is why, according to Rashi, Aleph Aleph Chayiv. There's a gewaltige kasha on Rashi, which Rebbe Kiva Eger and many other Achronim ask. Sugya Meforeshes Daf Kuf Daled in Shabbos. Aleph Aleph de Azreko Potur. Person wanted to write the word Azreko. Aleph Aleph Zayin Reish Chof. He wrote Aleph Aleph Potur. Shem Mishimon Chayiv. He wanted to write Shimon. He wrote the first two letters Chayiv. Why? Because Shun Mem is a word. Aleph Aleph Dazreko is not a word. So he's not Chayiv. So how does Rashi say Shnei Aleph in Chayiv? Two different tirutzim. Two different interpretations. Rebbe Kiva Eger says it's a machlokes Mishnah and Braisa. The Braisa says Aleph Aleph Dazreku Potur. Rashi maintains the Mishnah is chaylik on the Braisa because the Mishnah says Shnei Oisius Chayiv Bein Mishem Echod Bein Mishnei Shevis. A dover rochek to say machlokes Mishnah and Braisa when the Gemara doesn't say it. Usually, when there's a stira between Mishnah and the Braisa, the Gemara would ask that question. And the Gemara would say, Pligi. So Rebbe Kiva Eger is a doichik. Hagos HaRashash and the Sfas Emes both explain. Rashi maintains Aleph Aleph Chayiv, but that is only if his intention was to write Aleph Aleph. Aleph Aleph as part of a bigger word is only chayiv if it's a word into itself. And that's the difference between Shem and Shimon, Aleph Aleph de Azreko. So according to the Rishash and the Sfas Emes, and what is very significant, the Rishonim are a class for themselves, as we all know. So the Rishash and the Sfas Emes were zoicha to be mechaven to chidushi haran, Shabbos daf ayin hey. The Ran clearly makes this definition. Aleph Aleph b'fnei atzmai chayiv. Aleph Aleph de Azreku Potor. Only Shem Shimon is chayiv. And it's also mashmekach berambam. So once again, Aleph Aleph according to Rashi chayiv. According to Rambam, two different letters chayiv, even if it's not a word. Kosev os achas v'shlim on a sefer chayiv. So Meleches Kosev refers to letters. And Afro Piken, I agree with Reb Mordechai Bennett, but the shir of two Oisius is not about quantity. It's not just about chashivas. It is because Letters have no importance only because they compose words, and words are ruach memalala. Ruach memalala. Only man uses words. And that is the gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to man, and that is how we learn Torah. So that is how I reconcile Rav Mordechai Bennett with the basic assumption that Kosef is chayev shtei oisiyos. Chazal say shtei oisiyos. Chazal don't say tevois, but shtei oisiyos. Would there be an Esav Chotzashir? That is open for argument. The Meiri says yes. Maybe we would say no. It definitely is different than Akira and Anocha. Because Akira and Anocha are Tchilas HaMaisa v'Seifa. After all, Shtei Oisiyos are two of the same. It's two of the same. It's not like starting to write a letter and finishing it. And therefore, yes, Chotze Shir Shabbos is chayiv. Rashi speaks about Chotze Groi Geres. Ha'oike v'yeina maniach l'kuli alma is only derabona. That's a Gemara Meforeshes. Kosav Osachas, would it be a Chotze Shir? Open for discussion. The Meiri says Chotze Shir Osam in a Torah. There's room for argument. So let's go back to the question of two letters. Arba'o machloikes bedover. According to Rashi. Shnei alfen chayiv. According to the Rambam, two letters chayiv, even if it's not a word, but only two different letters. Two letters of the same, only if it's a word. According to the Akiva Eiger, Rashi is machayiv alaf alaf, even if it's part of a bigger word. According to the Rishash, Sfas Emes, and Chidush Haran, if it's part of a bigger word, must be a word into itself. Shem Shimon Chayev. Alaf Alaf Das Rekupoto. It is only Tosfos Daf Ayin Omed Beis that's mashma lachoira. I can't get into details. So usually by this year, I only spoke about the Yesodis of the Sugya. And I tried to stay away from little digdukim. But Tosfos Ayin Omed Beis seems to maintain that there never would be a chiyuv of shtei oisiyos only if they compose a word. And that would be the only source in the Rishonim that might maintain that Kosef refers to words, but it is a question whether that is really pshat in Tosfos. Kosef ois achas b'Tveria was ois achas b'Tzipori. Tveria and Tzipori, according to some Rishonim, are close to each other. In modern Israel, they are close to each other. But nevertheless, a person wrote one letter in Tveria, one letter in Tzipori Chayiv, even though they're 10 kilometers apart, or a kilometer apart, or 100 yards. What difference does it make? They don't read together. Mechusar karev alav ke mechusar mais. Definitely isn't a word, because as is, you can't read them together. But the Gemara says you could bring them together. And when you bring them together, nikron biyachad chayiv. Kosav osachas al koisel zeh, va'ois achas al koisel zeh. If it's in the corner, and the two letters are one next to the other, even though two walls, nikron biyachad chayiv. But of the two separate walls, one on your right, one on your left, potul. Mechusa netitza ke mechusa maisa. Mechusa kreiv alav ke mechusa maisa. So if you write two letters, you're not chayev. Elu im ken nikroim biyachad. I'm a big admirer of the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes is unique. Very interesting sefer. The Sfas Emes, his derech halimud was he learned Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, nothing more. Didn't learn the Rishonim. Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, pen and paper, and he wrote Ha'oros. That is unique amongst the Achronim. I don't think any other Achronim had this type of derech halimud. But we see the godless of the Sfas Emes. because he keeps on asking the kashas that we find in Rashba, Ritva, Rosh, Ran. And what's more amazing, usually he answers the terusim of the great Rishonim, and that proves his greatness and his yashrus. So the Sfas Emes was a Gerer Rebbe, as you know, and the Sfas Emes is very unique in this style and this derech halimud. And in this question, of course, of us achas b'tferia, us achas b'tzepoiri, he has a fascinating chakira. Is it because the two letters that he writes needs to read together? Once again, not necessarily it needs to be a word, but as I explained, the chashivos of letters is because letters are used to make up words, to convey words. So is it that his two letters need to read together? Or is it rather, a letter has no chashivas only if it reads together with another one? What's the nafka min halacha? A man wrote one letter on this wall, another letter on another wall. But on those two walls, there was a letter before the one he wrote. So the letter he wrote on this wall reads together with another one. The letter he wrote on the other wall leads together with another one, but his two letters do not read together. That's a fascinating chakira. So this Sfas Emes just gives us the question. He's less into chakiras, into definitions, into hagedoros. But the way I understand the question is, the chashivas of two letters is because two letters potentially could make up a word. They don't need to make up a word, but potentially they could, and that is why they're chashuv. So does his two letters need to have the ability to make up a word, one with the other, his two letters, or the chashivas of each letter in itself is potentially, it is part of a word. And that is the shaila of this Sfas Emes. At this stage, I would like to address a very fundamental question in Kotv. Kotv and Tzorveya are both on the list of Lametes Malachas. Each of them is an Av Malacha bifnei atzmai. Ma bein Kotv liTzorveya. L'cha'oira, one would assume Kotv is letters or numbers. Tzorveya is pictures. In English, we would say it is the difference between writing and drawing. You draw pictures, you draw portraits, you draw faces, landscapes, but drawing is about making a picture of a thing. Writing is writing symbols, letters, or numbers. Would that be the difference between Kotv and Tzorveya? No. The Rambam clearly says, Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Yud Zayin, Roishim Tziyurim B'Koisel. That was very common in the past. It's less common today. In old shuls, we have pictures on the walls, windows, either Shavotim or lions on top of the Oren Kodesh, Yerushalayim, Cave Rochel, some beautiful old shuls on the roof. There are pictures, the Nissan Bek Shul in Yerushalayim. Lahavdil Elef Alfei Avdolos, Lahavdil, in other Botei Tifla we find the same. So the Rambam writes, Haroshim Tzuras Biksolim, and obviously in palaces of the kings, of the princes, of the nobles, it was also common. Today it's extremely uncommon in new shuls or in homes. But I think many homes still have wallpaper scenery. So the Rambam writes, Roishen Tziurim B'Koisev Chai Mishum Koisev. It's not words, it's not letters, it's pictures, and it is Koisev. The great Steipel HaRav, the Kilis Yankov, deals with this question in Kilis Yankov. I think it's Siman Lamed Ches, on Masechet Shabbos. And he has two different drochim, two different approaches. Number one, he says, Koisev is all about what you write. Surveya is about what you write on. It is the surface. So Koisev is words or letters. When you write a word, it is all about the word, the message it conveys, numbers, the number they convey. So Koisev is not about the surface you're writing on. Surveya is painting. When you paint, you want to paint the wall. That is the difference between Koisev and Surveya. But I think the very same Rambam we mentioned before would also contradict this approach, because when we paint a picture on a wall, it is to beautify the wall, or maybe not. It is just to convey the picture. So maybe this would not be a stira to the Keheles Yankov. However, the Rambam, in a different source, Perek Chov Gimel, Aloch Yud Beis, the Rambam writes, Korcheles Chayav Mishum Koisev. So when a woman uses, how is it called? Eyeliner? I'm not sure. But for thousands of years, women used to color either their eyebrows or just, I don't know, I'm not into cosmetics. I think it's eyeliner. When some women use, you just make a dark line above their eyes. The Rambam writes that's Koisev. So it's not like a picture on the wall. You want people to look at the picture, but a woman wants to make herself, her face or her eyes more appealing, more beautiful, and that is Koisev. Why isn't it Surveya? The Keheles Yankov asks this question, and he reaches another definition, another Hagdara number 2, to differentiate between Koisev and Surveya. So the Keheles Yankov, I'm losing Lashon Kodesh. Not always could I properly give the real Hagdara in English, but I'm speaking to Talmud Chacham that learn in Lashon Kodesh. So the Keheles Yankov says, Surveya es hadavar, Koisev al hadavar. So when you are Surveya, it is Surveya es hadavar, Koisev al hadavar. Would that be miyashav the kasha from Kocheles? Isn't she coloring her eye, her eyebrow? Is it on or it? Open for discussion. But what bothers me more, and this is a question I don't think the Keheles Yankov deals with, Shabbos Tafayin Hey, Shoichet Mishum Mayim Achayev, Machlekes Rav and Shmuel, Mishum Natilas Neshama, or Tzoiveya. And the Gemara says, Af Mishum Tzoiveya. So when a person shechts an animal, and the Gemara says, Nichale, he wants the fresh blood to be on the neck of the animal, that clients should see that this meat is fresh, the blood is still fresh. That is Soveya. So he has no intention of coloring the meat. He has no intention of making the meat red. He means the blood. He wants people to see fresh blood and to know that this behemoth was shechted right now, not a day or two or a week ago. And that is why he wants the fresh blood. So he isn't pretending to paint the neck of the animal. And Afro Biken it's Soveya, not Koisev. Why is that? Lani is Daiti. The difference between Koisev and Soveya is very clear. And that's what the Minchas Osha says. Koisev gives form. Soveya gives color. It's as simple as that. Just like Soveya in modern language, in modern Hebrew. It's coloring. It's painting. Koisev gives form. Soveya gives color. So when you buy your kids a drawing book, and all the children need to do is give color. The pictures are there. You just fill in the colors. That's Soveya. But in some of these books you buy your kids, the kids need to connect points or numbers. And that gives form. And then they will color those pictures. So that is first Koisev and then Soveya. And that is my understanding, my interpretation of the Yerushalmi in Shabbos Daf Samach Daled. Ho'oise tzuro harishon chayev mishum Koisev, hasheni chayev mishum Soveya. What does that mean? Kilisanker brings this Yerushalmi. And he struggles with the interpretation. And he says, the Sheni just giving finishing touches. He's just adding on some tzeva here and there. And that is why he doesn't have the cheshivas of ksiva, but rather tzeveya. No. My understanding is the first one makes the outline. The second one comes and fills in the color. And that is why Rishon chayev mishum koisev, Sheni chayev mishum Soveya. So once again, the way I understand the difference between Koisev and Soveya, Koisev gives form, letters, numbers, even pictures. You give form. Hatzoveya kishmoy keinhu. He gives color. So I quoted the Rambam before. The Rambam writes, Korcheles chayeves mishum Koisev. And that is women that color their eyebrows, eyeliners close to the eyelashes, or even lipstick. According to the Rambam, chayev mishum Koisev. Many Rishonim write chayev mishum Soveya. There are two gersois in the Gemara. So the Gemara of Kuv Hey deals with the question of Korcheles, and there are two different gersois, two different versions in the Gemara. According to what we have in Shas Vilna, Hakorcheles chayeves mishum Koisev, v'chi derech ksiva bekach, elu mishum Soveya. The Rambam has an opposite gerson. Hakorcheles chayeves mishum Soveya, v'chi derech ksiva bekach, elu mishum Koisev. Obviously, there is a Havamina and a Maskana. And a Machlokes Rishonim, what is the Maskana? What is the question? Why is Korcheles so perplexing? That we have a Havamina and a Maskana, and a Machlokes Rambam and other Rishonim, what is the Havamina, what is the Maskana? And to me it seems so clear, because Korcheles gives both form and color. And that is why the question, what is the Ikar? So the Korcheles needs to be exact. It's not like putting makeup on your cheeks, on your face, which is only color. That is only Soveya. Korcheles, it's like drawing a picture. drawing around your eye, going according to your natural eyebrow. Lipstick goes on your lips. So you don't want to smear lipstick on your chin, but you do want to cover your lips. So it's both color and form. That is why Kocheles is unique. And it's a machlokes hava and a maskana, and the question is, what is the maskana? Is it primarily about form or primarily about color? So yes, lipstick usually is one color. Eyeliner would be a different color. Nobody would color their eyes red. Nobody would use black lipstick. Maybe they would. Today is a crazy world. Today, I don't know. I'm not up to date. We no longer know what's nice, what isn't nice. It's a crazy world. But anyway, that is the question of Kocheles. So La'ani is daiti. Kotv gives form. Kocheles, Tzorvea gives color. And that is the kavanah of the Yerushalmi. Rishon chayav mishum Kotv, Sheni chayav mishum Tzorvea. And that is the fundamental difference. So this brings us to a fundamental question. Usually at the end of every Sefer Torah, the Sefer outlines letters, and then we have Choshev people come, Ksivas Oisius. So most of the people are in Sefer Stam. They can't write a letter, but they could fill in when the outline is done. Is that Kotv or is it Tzorvea? According to my opinion, it would be Tzorvea. You have the outline, you have the form, you're just filling in the color. Is that Tzorvea or Kotv? So if someone does that on Shabbos, what type of hasra do we need to give him? Is it Kotv or Tzorvea? Is the Sefer Torah kosher when the letters are just outlined and there is no coloring in the letter? So sometimes we have people come and we want to be machabed them. Sometimes they're donors, rich people. And not everybody is makbed, they should be shoymrei Torah. Would that somewhat diminish the kashrus or the hiddur of the Sefer Torah? If the outline is kosher, then maybe who fills in the letter would make less difference. But if that is not a kosher ksav, then we should be more vigilant and diligent. Who are the people that are finishing that Sefer Torah? The only source I'm aware of is Shoel HaMeshiv. Maduri Gimel Chelak Aleph Siman Shin Tzaddik. And the Shoel HaMeshiv says the Sefer would be kosher, even if all we have is the outline of the letter. And bifnim, it's white, the color of klaf. We didn't fill in the color. After Piken, it would be kosher b'diavad, but even he says lechatchela, of course, those letters should be filled in. So our discussion today was defining Meleches Kotv, and the second part of this year was differentiating between Kotv and Tzorvea. Hafoch bo v'hafoch bo dekulei bo. And sometimes my shir is more like a shir hakdama to a sugya. And these are some fundamental questions on chakiras and diyunim regarding Meleches Kotv and the kesher between Kotv and Tzorvea. So differentiating between Kotv and Tzorvea, I brought two different approaches of the Keras Yaakov, and approach number 3, Hanera Yoisa La'ani es daiti. It was a pleasure being with you today, like every time in the past. And b'siyata d'shmaya, we should all be zeicha many more times in the future. Kol tov, thank you, Reb Shloima, and we should share many wonderful hours of Talmud Torah.